In today's video, we're going to be looking at the subject of small boats, how to draw them, and how to paint them. Hi, my name is Joe Cartwright. Welcome to my studio. My aim with these videos is to help you paint better watercolours. This series is all about the basics. If you're a beginner or have found painting with watercolours challenging, then please join in, as these videos are for you. And remember, if you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll be informed of each new video I produce. One of the topics we have to look at is the subject of linear perspective. Linear perspective is how we create the impression of depth, the impression of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. To help with that, I've created a drawing that should make linear perspective a little bit clearer for you. This is the drawing I've produced. You can find many similar examples of this in any book that discusses linear perspective. What I've drawn here is just a very simple boat, but it shows you what it would look like as the boat is closer to you and is moving away, also when it's on the left of you and when it's on the right. When you're drawing a scene like this, the key line, and always the first line I draw, is the horizon. Another name for the horizon is eye level. In a street scene or interior setting, or even in some landscapes, you can't always see the horizon, but you can always determine where eye level is. So the two are totally interchangeable. When you draw a subject, as it moves further away from you, you find that, and when we're talking about similar subjects, so this is the same boat I've drawn in each case. As it moves further away from you, it gets smaller. And the thing with boats is, the closer it is to you, the more, think in terms of this is a drawing drawn from maybe a small pier. The boat that's closer to me allows me to see more inside the boat. As the boats move further away, I see less and less. So the boats are getting smaller, and then I also see less and less of the interior of this small boat. And that's very important. Quite often people draw boats and all their boats look like this, whether they're close up or in the distance, and you can see if you draw something like this here, it would look more like a rocket ship rather than a boat. When you're drawing something like this, to get the shape, let's have a look at this one here. To get the boat looking like it's pointing in the direction it should, and that the bow's in the right spot and all the angles are correct, a useful technique is to, and this is only while you're first learning, once you understand how boats are structured and how they vary, how to draw them in different positions, you really don't have to go to the trouble of creating these boxes or drawing these particular lines. But when you're first learning, it's a very useful technique. So to draw this boat, what I did is I've started with one line which really indicates roughly how high that boat is, and then I connected that line back to a single point, and this is what we call a vanishing point. So each boat will have a vanishing point. If they're all in line like this, they'll all be using the same vanishing point, but if they're in different positions, they'll have different vanishing points. So this side of the boat will have a vanishing point in this direction, and then the back of the boat will have another vanishing point, which quite often, depending on the angle of the boat, may be quite a distance in this direction, right? So in this case, just to give you an idea, you can see how the back of the boat, because it's heading in that direction, has a vanishing point all the way over here. Now this, I've arbitrarily picked that point. I could have brought it closer or moved it further away because this was just a made-up scene. In reality, the vanishing point could be much further away, and then this part of the boat would have looked closer to horizontal. And in a minute I'm going to show you some photographs that highlight that. But basically, once I've drawn this line, extended those lines to this vanishing point, and on this side I extend those lines to the second vanishing point, I can create a box within which I will then draw the boat. So once I've drawn this line to this distant vanishing point, I can then decide how wide the back of this box is, draw a vertical line, and then I connect these 2 points to this vanishing point, which establishes this side of the box. And then here I just arbitrarily decide that's how long I want to make this boat, draw that line and connect that to that vanishing point. And as soon as I've done that, I've created a box. Once you've created that box with I can then put the boat inside it. Probably the only other things I need to note, to find where the center is, which is where the bow meets the edge of that, the top edge of that box, an easy technique is to connect the back here, connect the corners. Where they cross, draw a vertical line and then run that also down to the vanishing point, and that will give you exactly where the front of the boat will connect to the edge of that box. The back of the boats normally curve inwards. I come in a small amount on either side, and that allows me to draw the back of the boat. Then all that's required is for me to connect the bow to the stern of the boat, coming out, and because the hull bows out like that, this edge just touches the edge of this box, and it does that on both sides, right? And that gives us the shape of the boat at the top. We've got the sides. The sides come in. The edge of the boat that's closer to me will look, because of the way these angles change depending on where they're positioned, this line will look a little bit more vertical than that. What you see in these shapes will vary depending on their location and the location of the viewer, how close to the viewer they are, how far away from the viewer they are, both in terms of in front and to the side of the viewer. Let's have a look at some photos. In this scene here, we have a number of boats, and you can see as the boats move further away, how they're getting smaller and smaller. Here is another example. I've drawn this line here is the horizon line, and just roughly indicating, these boats are all, they're not exactly the same size, but they're generally similar in size. And you can see as they move away, they, because they're all in a line, they appear to be moving towards this vanishing point, and they're getting smaller and smaller as they do that. And you can see how in the foreground, or here, I can comfortably look into the boat. I can see a little bit less in this one, less than that, and then as they move along, I really can't see very much in these ones here. Here we've got the pier, and you can see how this line of the edge of the pier, this line, this edge of the pier also meet at the same vanishing point. Okay, and just to emphasize, here's a couple of figures, and their eyes are very close to the horizon line. Again, hence why we call this eye level. Another thing to look at, as objects move further away from you, they appear to be getting closer and closer to the horizon or eye level. If we look at this scene here, if we were to analyze this scene, this boat here, because it's pointing in this direction, it will have a vanishing point somewhere over here, lengthwise, but sidewise, if this is the top of the boat and there's where it hits the water, its vanishing point will be somewhere way to this part of the screen, multiple screens across. As the boats move further away, when they're close up, if this is the height of the boat, and this, from this point to this point, is the distance from the back edge to wherever the bow or the front of the boat is. As it's closer, this part becomes greater than this. As the boats move further away, this component, if we look at this boat here, this component is already greater than that distance from the top edge of the boat to the front of the boat. And then here's another boat even further away, and again this is even greater still, the proportion of the height of the boat versus how much you can see from the back to the front. I'm now going to do the painting. The first stage will be the drawing, followed by the watercolor painting itself. To help keep the paper in place for the time being, I've just used a couple of pieces of masking tape. But later I'll actually be wetting the back of the paper, so I don't want to tape the sheet down onto the board. The paper itself is roughly 11 inches by 7.5 inches, or 28.5 centimeters by 19 centimeters. I'm keeping all the paintings to this size because for this course I've limited our brushes to just these two brushes, right? Now later, if you decide, wow, you really like watercolor, which I hope you do, and you want to continue with it, you'll end up adding additional brushes, that's a size 16, that's a size 24, and maybe, a size 6 and a rigger or something like that, and one or two other brushes. But for the time being, we're just going to use these two brushes here. So first line I'm going to draw for our drawing is the horizon line. If you're more comfortable just getting a ruler and drawing with a ruler, then go ahead and do that, whatever makes it easy for you. The main thing is to make sure that this line is parallel, or roughly parallel, to the bottom of your paper. So one way of checking that is to put the end of your brush on the line and then use your thumb and index finger to mark the bottom of the paper, and then as you move across you check, and that's pretty right. Let's do this as per the exercise I showed you before, but realize that once you get experience, and if you've got like a photographic reference, or you're out in the real world painting plein air, then you don't have to draw all these perspective lines. But when you're first starting, it's not a bad idea. So we'll start with one line here. I want this boat to be facing somewhere like, let's say here, and we can draw our perspective lines and make it a bit easier. Just grab a ruler. I'll make this boat a little bit shorter. There we go. And that's our first vanishing point. And then the other vanishing point is somewhere off the paper. So I'm just going to, for this exercise, assume it is out this way. And those two lines have to merge together, so I'll just angle this in a small amount and then draw the vertical line. So that's the back of this boat. And if I come back here, join that up, and then all I have to do is decide how long I want my boat to be in this direction. So remember, the more you can see inside the boat, the closer it is to you. The further away, the less you'll see. So I'm going to assume if this is the height of the boat, to the front of the boat, or the top edge is maybe 1 and a bit lengths of this. So if that's the case, it's going to be to about there. And then again, so we've got a vanishing point that is somewhere off the edge of the paper, and when we draw our box, that same line for the front of the box also merges with that vanishing point. It doesn't have to be totally accurate. However, if this line is going this direction, you can't have this line in this angle, because it will be, instead of merging with a distant vanishing point, it will be moving away from it. So we'll just find the middle. There we go, and then we'll extend this. Okay, so there's the box we're going to put our boat in. So we come in a small amount, angle. So this angle is generally a little bit steeper than this. There's the front of the boat. We can now come around, put the bow in, and then bring this line back, and it's got to touch that line about the same spot that that one did. There we go. So there's the top of the boat. We'll modify the back, and then this comes down and bows out a little, and we just line it up there. And that's pretty good for that boat. Now we'll put another boat over here. Let's start with, maybe we'll bring them a little bit closer. There. This one will be a bit smaller than that boat, and it will have a vanishing point. Let's say it's pointing to about here. Don't press too hard. Call this vanishing point 2, and that one's 1. Don't press too hard. You've got to remove these lines. And now, because this boat is more perpendicular to the paper, not quite, but getting that way, then this vanishing point is even further away. So it's got to be less of an angle than this. So let's adjust it to that. And that just a little bit. And we'll make the boat a little bit narrower. There we go. Again, the middle. Because the boat's further away from us, we're going to see less of the inside of the boat. So maybe just come up, instead of 1 times the height plus extra, we'll just come up 1 times the height. And we'll mark that. Now we can draw the side of the boat, like that. Again, I'm going to make this angle just a bit steeper. And this is where the boat will touch the box coming back. There we go. I'm going to make the boat itself a little bit shallower. That's not going to make any big difference. So bring this down that. Then we've got the side of the boat. There we go. So there's our two boats. We might put one smaller one just for compositional purposes, maybe here, and it's going to be pointing straight up, so I really don't need any perspective lines for that. There, I'll just sort of hint at the front of the boat, but you're not going to see very much. So there are our three boats. I can now get rid of these perspective lines and the box. We'll throw in maybe a bollard here, and then later we'll connect it. Same here. And here there'll just be an anchor, but we'll do that later. Now these boats will have a reflection, and when you're doing a reflection, the reflection is always directly below the object. So if this is the corner of the boat, the reflection will be roughly directly below that. Why I say roughly, if the boats were sitting on a mirror, it would be exactly below that point. But because you have a lot of these undulations in the water, it can move a little bit. But by the same token, you wouldn't expect the reflection of this point to be somewhere over here or somewhere over there. It's generally below that. And so I'll just lightly mark that in. Same here, that point somewhere here. And I'm just marking the reflection in with very light squiggles, just so I can remember where they're going to go. In fact, we're going to put another bollard here. Make these a bit bigger. I'm just making this up as I go, but this will have a reflection. And I might put it here. This way the reflections can connect with the boat. And then here, up here, all I'm going to do is going to have some sort of hill in the distance, and that will come down to the water's edge. In here, we might put in a seat. Just a little covered area at the front of both of these boats. That'll do. All right, so I'm ready to start painting. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tape off, and to give myself more time to paint, I'm going to wet the back of the paper. The reason for that is, the main reason the paper dries isn't so much because of the water evaporating, but because the water is first absorbed into the paper, and then that tiny little veneer that's left on the surface evaporates. So what I've found is if I wet the back quite significantly, and you'll see how I do that, and then paint, the front will stay dry, and then I'm painting on the front, I'll still be able to create my broken edges and things like that, but it will give me a lot more time to keep painting. So let's start with that. So I'll pick up my brush, and I have a bead of water just moving down the paper. Keep that going. It doesn't matter if I get some water on the other side, but certainly for this subject because of the colours I'm using, but it's better to be a little bit more careful. So run there, then I'll come back and add another wash. And what this does is as the paper absorbs the moisture, it expands and it will give you a very flat surface to work on that doesn't cockle. And cockling is where it starts to buckle, which happens quite often, even if you tape your paper down, and you'll see how this works. Anyway, I've put 2 heavy loads of water on that. I'll let it sit there. Let's get rid of some of this excess moisture here. And while that's absorbing that moisture, I'll mix my starting colours. So for the sky, I'm just going to mix a weak pale blue, and then the water is going to be darker than that. So normally the sky is your lightest passage, so we'll just mix a little bit of very weak blue, and that's good enough. I don't need it any stronger than that. But now for the water, and it's not going to be a very bright blue because it's going to be a little bit, slightly dull. So I'm going to add some little bit of permanent rose and a little bit of yellow. And that's not too bad actually. And that will do for our water mixture. Alright, so now the paper's been absorbing this moisture, you can see it's still got a ways to go because it's cockled a little bit there. But, so what I do now, I'll get another size 12 brush. And obviously if I was painting bigger, I would use my size 24 brush to wet the back, because you need to use a lot of brush strokes with the size 12 brush. But for the exercise, it does the job. There we go. And now I'll pick up my brush and I'm going to wet the board. Obviously you need a waterproof board to do this, otherwise the board will absorb too much moisture. And I'll just wipe up some of this excess moisture. And the other good thing with this technique is the paper sits flat, it's held onto the board with just surface tension, and you get a chance to paint bigger. So let's start with the sky. And I'm going to paint all the way through the hill in the distance as well. I'm going to get rid of some of this excess moisture. There we go. I want this to dry fairly quickly. There we go. That'll do. And now while that's drying, I'm going to paint the water. And I want some glitter on the water just to direct the eye towards the boats. So the first thing I'm going to paint is that glitter. And I paint the glitter by painting the blue water around it. So I'll pick up my watercolor or my paint that's the colour of water, drag it through the edge of my palette to take out about half of the moisture. And I'm going to start in the distance, and I want the light to come through this way. So let's start by creating a pattern like a bit of a zigzag. You don't want it dead straight as you do when you get light rays in a forest or something like that. And the water, because of the undulations and the ripples in the water, that it just doesn't happen that way. Pick up some more, take some moisture out, and give it more of a bit of a zigzaggy shape. Before that dries, and this really won't dry very quickly because I have wet the back. So I'll just quickly come back and connect those shapes like that. Same with this side. So I'm bringing that water down in each side at the same rate. And that stops any edges, sort of sharp edges forming where the paint just dries in one spot. Got to be a little bit careful painting around the boats. Usually I just paint around them and then drag some paint out. And I'll leave the odd little bit of untouched paper here and there too, just to add some extra glitter here and there. There we go. Now this is where you keep your spray bottle handy, because if it does start to dry quickly, then you need to give it a light spray. And through the back there. There we go, and that gives me hopefully an interesting pattern. I'll make it a bit smaller in the distance. There we go. And then a few extra bits of white back here. Now what I'm going to do very quickly, I'm going to pick up some of this paint, put it into a dry part of my palette, then pick up some more paint, bit of the blue, bit of the red, and I'm going to use that, just test it quickly, yep, to create some undulations in the water, again to make it look a bit more interesting. The main thing with undulations is as they get closer to you, they get bigger, or another way of looking at it is this, they get smaller as they move into the distance and less distinct. So I'll just throw a few. I don't keep going all the way because one, you're likely to hit some dry paper and you'll end up with cauliflowers. And then I connect some of these shapes so that's not, lots of little dabs all the same size and shape and direction. And that's pretty good for that. All right. Now, because I didn't wait for the sky to dry before I started painting, I've got some of this paint that's flowed up. So I'll just lift that. I want to adjust that. Okay. And now this is almost dry enough that I can put in the hill. What I'm going to do is here and there just break up any edges that I feel are just too sharp. Maybe even this shape, just modify it a little bit. That'll do. Okay. All right, now I'm just going to dry this because I need this area to be dry before I paint the hill. So I'll just get the hairdryer. Sometimes if you dry it that much that the paper dries underneath as well, then you have to go through the re-wetting process. But this is good enough. So the hill has to be darker than the water, but this water already has, so this hill already has the sky color across it. So I could go on over the top with just the color of the water, and that it would give us something like that, which is the leftover color. Or I could add a bit more, make it just a tad darker. So, and I'll get my size 6 brush and I'll use that to make this leading edge a bit more interesting. Make it look like there's some trees. Like that. And then I'll quickly go in, pick up that paint and connect into that shape. And in more advanced classes we talk about leaving areas of white in the hill and making them look like buildings or something like that. But really right now I'm more interested in just concentrating on our boats. There we go. And I'm leaving the odd sort of broken edge down here just for interest. I can pick up some of this dark paint and maybe vary the hill just a bit, just to make it look a bit more interesting. That'll do. All right, so now we'll do the boats, and the boats are very small in size, so I'm just going to use my size 8 brush for that. When this dries, I'm going to put a small reflection, hint of a reflection of that hill in the distance. But right now, let's work on these boats. This little boat here, it's really quite a long way away, so its tone will be quite light. That'll do. So I'm just using the leftover sky color, and then I'm going to give it just a hint of a reflection. There we go. Now with boats, because of their curvature and where they connect to the water, one, that area is quite often discolored, but also because of the curvature of the boat adds an extra shadow there, and that actually is what helps make our boat look like it's floating on water. So what I do, I've painted the back of the boat and a little bit of the reflection. Now I'm going to pick up some quite thick paint and just some blue, a little bit of the permanent rose, and just a tiny bit of the yellow to create a dark grey colour, almost black. And then we'll just draw that line at the water's edge. And if you time it right, what happens is some of the colour will bleed up and other colour will bleed down, and you get this sort of graduated dark edge that one gives the boat a little bit of form, but also helps connect it to the water. Might make that boat just a little bit darker. There we go. That'll do. And now we'll work on this boat. I'll do the inside of the boat first. There's the back of the boat. There's the seat. And in here there'll be areas that are lighter, depending on the light that's reflecting into them, and other areas that are a bit darker. So what I'm going to do is pick up some of this darker paint that I used for these areas, and I'm going to add some more colour to it. And I'm just going to mix the three primaries together to create an almost black, but not quite. And I'll use that to just darken some part of that boat. There we go. And we'll let that sit there. That will work on this other boat. I'm going to paint the inside of this boat with a dull red colour. Which is basically the pink with the Winsor lemon. When I say pink, I'm meaning permanent rose. And that'll just give it some colour. Now this is a bit too dark, so I'll just lift that. So when you're lifting paint, you basically clean your brush, squeeze the moisture out, and then run your brush over the paint you want to lift, and the brush sucks up that paint. Okay, same here. I'll just make one area that's darker than another. Go on with this darker paint. There'll be a darker shadow underneath that lip there, and the same here. There we go. And I want to keep that a bit. There we go. All right, now the back of this boat is I'm just going to use the blue. But the way I've drawn it here, because the light's coming from this direction, then the back of the boat's in shadow, so I make that darker than the water, because the light's going to be hitting the water but not the back of the boat. So that's a key point to keep in mind. There we go. And I'll do the same for this one. Bring that down. And just to simulate some rust or something like that on the boat, I'm going to pick up some permanent rose and a little bit of the yellow, looking for a clean yellow rather than the yellow that's got all this green over the top of it. And we'll drop some of that into the side of the boat. These are meant to be old tin boats, basically. That's fine. Now the light's coming from here, so this side of the hull will have some light on it, so it won't be as dark as the back of the boat. Same here, again, only marginally here, because while this is sort of blocked from the light, you could expect some light to be reflecting off this area. Having said that, the difference is not that great, so I'll add a bit more colour to it. I just want this side to be lighter than that. There we go. Good. I'll get some more of that rust colour and add some of that to the top of the boat, maybe on the seat. And just tint it a little bit. There we go. All right, now we're going to do the reflection. And the general rule is reflections of a dark object are going to be lighter, and reflections of a light object are dark. The reason for that is the colour, the reflection colour is a combination of the colour of the object that's being reflected and the colour of the water, right? So let's paint that. There. Give it little squiggles. Here there'll be a little bit of a reflection. Create a brown, dark brown colour when you use that for these bollards. You know, put another one here. And that means this will have a reflection that'll come down this way. And now I need, just like I put that dark line there, I need to do the same for this boat here. The Winsor blue, just a little bit of the yellow and some of the permanent rose. There we go. There. I'll throw a bit of this rust colour into the reflection as well. Now, if this is lighter there, then its reflection will also be a little bit lighter. That'll do. And this boat, again, we'll pick up this dark colour. and the bollards will have a reflection. And we'll connect that, there. It's better. And we might throw some birds up here. Another one here. Maybe one here. I'm just filling in some of this empty space. Let me dry this, and then I might make one or two small adjustments. All right, so I've dried this quite thoroughly, and I'm just going to wet the back just enough to stick it to my board. You could, just tape it if you want, but then you need tape. So I mentioned before I want to give this hill a little bit of a reflection. Now, I've dried this with a hairdryer. You have to wait till the surface cools down before you start painting, otherwise the paint will just dry too quickly, right? So just very light, more of a hint of a reflection thing. There we go. And I might, just near the water's edge, just throw in a quick dry brush stroke just to make it look a little bit more interesting. Because in reality you wouldn't just get a sharp edge, there'd be rocks there, boats and lots of other things. So now if I get the mat for an 1/8 sheet, and it's handy for you to have a collection of these mats, and we'll sign that over here, make it a bit darker. And the signature is part of the painting, right? Meaning it can alter the balance for painting, so you do have to have a little bit of thought as to where to put it in. Okay, I'm going to just darken that line on the water's edge a little bit, just to define that a bit better. Same with that. And then this one in the distance, just soften that with my finger. maybe here. Underneath that seat could be darkened a bit. And we'll soften this. Great, and that's it. It's just a little painting. Really, I just wanted to teach you how to paint these simple boats and to make them look like they're one, make them look like they're boats, and two, that they're floating on water. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one. If you have any questions at all about this painting, please leave them in the comments section below. I do read them, and I will answer them. It also gives me some useful feedback for future videos.